Well, I did tell a bunch of first graders that a bear would eat their face once in class on accident. So
how do you say that on accident?
Yeah, I can. Okay, I'm going to get this going. Sorry. When my kids were small and they'd be like, can I go pet that dog? And I would say, no, that dog will eat your face, like as a joke. And then we were reading Blueberries for Sal, and they get mixed up with the bear and the kid, and she turns around, the bear's there. And I told them, I was like, how would you feel? And they were like scared. And I was like, yeah, because a bear would eat your face. And then I went, I mean, because you're adorable. It's like when your mom says I could eat you up, like not eat your face.
None of those kids ever wanted to go on any family vacations.
No, they're still around. They seem to be fine. Everything worked out for them, but I did tell them that a bear would eat their face.
Welcome to Classical Etc. You're in the studio with Memoria Press.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Classical Etc. I'm Jessica Gardner, and I'm here today with Tanya Charlton, Paul Schaefer, and returning guest, Tara Luse. Tara is the principal for the lower school here at Highlands Latin School at our Spring Meadows campus. She is a returning guest to this podcast, a fan favorite.
I think we should upgrade her to regular contributor.
Hall of Fun is what I like to say.
How many times do you have to come here before you get a button made with your face on it?
Well, that's a marketing question.
Whatever that number is, I'm here for that. Okay. When I hit that number, that's what I'm here for.
We can make that happen.
Okay.
That would sell. Should I get a button? Yeah.
That has to say something that you're known for. So you have to say something that in a podcast that
memorable
really sticks with people. Yes.
Okay, I'll do my best.
You can do that.
Actually, my whole goal is not to say anything that people really remember and go, gosh, Tara said that on the podcast. So,
oh, Tara, you bring so many skills and resources to your role. And one of the things that you're known for is being an expert at classroom management. And on that note, today's episode is about how to deal with challenging students. So it's going to be a doozy, I think. This is a good one.
Yes, it is. It's super important. It deserves some time.
Yeah, definitely. Well, before we get started, we always talk about what we're reading. Paul, you were just had a book open in front of you right before we started.
I was perusing The Richest Man in Babylon. It's an interesting book.
And obviously we were boring.
No, I really want to read this book.
So much that our conversation took you into the middle of the book.
So far, it's good. I'm only on the third chapter, but I'm also, Mitchell and I are teaching this personal, what would we call it?
Finance.
Personal finance class in the summer.
I didn't know you and Mitchell were teaching it.
Yes, we are.
Well, that should be something.
I'm teaching, I think, 3 of the 5 classes, and he's teaching 2 of them.
Oh, you're not teaching together.
No, he's teaching. He's teaching first and last class, and I'm teaching the middle classes.
I thought this will be a circus.
It might still be a circus with just each one of us different days. But then folks wanted it to be worth some high school credit, so we figured we needed a book. So we're looking for a book that will be appropriate. And this one's interesting because it's all financial principles told through parables.
Oh, wow.
Through biblical parables?
No.
Made up parables.
Babylonian made up parables.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's just stories of like Babylon being seen as a rich civilization, but then, how do you extrapolate from that the way for an individual to manage their wealth properly or their finances.
Tanya, how about you?
I am less than 200 pages away from finishing Middlemarch.
Wow.
So I'm very close, but probably won't finish it this weekend. And I'm still listening to A Gentleman in Moscow. But I did watch, so that narrator is so good, which I've said before. But I did watch the first episode of the show, and I just don't know. I'll watch another one, I suppose, but it just, once you've got those characters in your head and what everything should look like in your head, it's really hard to go back and see a movie or a TV show because it's never the same. They're not the same.
I thought that with All the Light You Cannot See. I
haven't seen that.
I just loved the book, and then I maybe watched 10 minutes of the first episode and thought, oh, this isn't what I. Yeah, I don't want to.
Right, it's not.
I don't want to ruin what I so enjoyed.
Right, I totally agree. So I don't know, because I love that book. So I think that makes it harder than to watch a show.
Yeah,
yeah. So we'll see. I might give it another. I hate to give up on something after one episode. It wasn't bad. In fact, if I hadn't read the book, I probably would have been really fascinated and interested. Mm-hmm. The acting was very good. Mm-hmm. It's just not the count in my head. Yeah.
Tara, what's on your bookshelf?
I want to start going before Tanya because I always sound like I'm copying her. But I am reading Middlemarch because she told me to. And then she gave me the book.
It's our Memoria Press book group.
But I'm not doing that well with it. Mm-hmm. I am I'm not even to 200 pages in. And then my library thwarted me by sending me the copy of Love in the Time of Cholera, which I've been waiting on. Oh, yeah. So then I started it. So now I'm doing very poorly in both books. But summer's coming and I will catch up.
Yes, well,
at least you said that the other day, and I don't know that I voiced this, but I really wanted to say I don't recommend that book.
I don't recommend
That's
that
what
book
she said.
either.
The ending.
Oh, it's just it's not the it's not the ending. It's just the last quarter of the book or so. I mean, there's just a really disturbing circumstance.
Ooh.
And the I don't even think that like the general thrust of the book redeems it.
I don't either. I don't think you can redeem that.
Yeah.
Honestly.
Well, now I'm afraid.
Yeah, so get back to Middlemarch.
Okay, so let's start this again. I'm reading Middlemarch, and I am very focused on it going forward.
So Middlemarch I love George Eliot, but it is, I think, my least favorite George Eliot book, and it's the one she's most known for. But there's so much sidestepping, I think.
You mean like side plots?
No, just like the author speaking, or all of a sudden there'll be this chapter about the town politics or something that just feels like it's ripping you away from the
narrative.
Yes, and really War and Peace was like that too. You know, Tolstoy did a lot of just talking, stream of consciousness talking. And I feel like that's what Eliot is doing in this book. But overall, I do love it.
What's your favorite?
I think my favorite is Daniel Deronda, which nobody knows she wrote. Silas Marner's very good for a short one. We've done Silas Marner though.
Yeah. I mean, I remember reading Daniel Deronda and preferring Silas Marner
to Daniel Deronda.
But Silas Marner speaks to me like particularly in certain ways that Daniel Deronda just didn't resonate with my life in a way that Silas Marner did.
Right.
Good stuff. Lots of variety. Got a finance book. Middlemarch.
One not to finish.
That's exactly right. Got some revisions.
I don't think I've ever heard them say like, absolutely stop reading that book. So.
No, I mean, we gave it a shot. You should probably give it a shot. It's a good story. It just goes.
When we read it, we did finish it. We read it as Memoria Press group, but it was when we were transitioning. The Memoria Press group started as we were reading the read alouds because they had been chosen by teachers, but we hadn't necessarily read them all. So we were reading them, and then we decided, okay, well, let's go to adult books, and we went to that, and we were like, woo,
too adult,
yeah,
too far. Okay. We went too far.
I'm going to let you guys give me the spoilers when we're off air.
But you wanted you got that because you want to read another book he wrote.
I did. I thought I want to read The General in his Labyrinth, but then I thought I will go with this first as my introduction.
Well, maybe you should have started with The General in his Labyrinth,
perhaps, unless anybody tells me otherwise.
Yes, I haven't read that.
I have not read that. It sounds more interesting.
I'm gonna give. Okay.
Next time you're on, you can give that update.
I will.
Well, don't forget Middlemarch, otherwise Tanya will be giving you grief for that.
That's right.
But I just said no to Middlemarch.
We don't have a date.
I am not great at saying no, so there's first my problem.
Did you say no to Middlemarch?
I did, and Michelle still added me to the group, but she didn't buy me a book, but she still added me to the group, and I'm like, I'm not reading this. I don't have time to read this. So
it's funny. Well, on to today's topic. We're talking about tips for teaching and dealing with challenging students. And we're actually responding to a terrific forum post. The Memoria Press forum is quite an active place that people can comment on, give advice, ask for advice. And someone who uses our curriculum asked, after she had been listening to one of our podcasts on maintaining good study and school habits, she asked, how do I deal with my challenging students? And I wanted to read exactly part of her question just to frame it up. She says, I have 5 boys, and I sometimes feel like I'm being trampled on. It takes a lot of strength to hold the line when they're asking, oh, this is so hard, or I've already written so much today. I'll find myself saying, okay, we'll just see how much you can do in just 15 minutes. Instead of making them finish what I laid out for them in the beginning of the day, knowing that that was what would be appropriate and required for them. Does anyone have rules I can stick to? Something external to point to when the whining gets tough? I know they can do it. This child who said the math was too much finished the 30 more problems in 10 minutes. I so believe in hard work and excellence, but my will gets worn down after a while. Do I require a rewrite of every word spelled wrong in assignments? Do I require every line filled in? To some extent, I appreciate the freedom given to homeschoolers to adjust the tasks based on their kids. But for me, if I give an inch, they can take a mile. Like on writing an answer versus doing questions orally, what are some non-negotiables and good standards that I need to give them? What does a good homeschool look like? I thought that was a great question. There's a lot in there.
And she's gotten some great help from other people on the forum too.
Definitely. Yeah, I saw that.
That's the great thing about the forum is they're helping each other.
That's right. Well, Tara, I'd like to start with you. As you listen to that question, what are some of the first things on your mind?
Well, the very first thing in hearing and reading through that entire post is I would offer her encouragement, because I don't know that everybody could see at home who's watching, but when she was saying those things, we all went, yeah, we've done that. Teaching is really hard. It's worthwhile, but it's not for the faint of heart. So I think her reevaluating is important. And honestly, all teachers should be doing that, should be checking themselves regularly. Am I upholding the standards? So I give her lots. I think she's in the right spot, doing the right thing there. But as far as standards and non-negotiables, I think, we could sit here and list them all, but it would take the entirety of the podcast. We could just do a laundry list of pencil grip and math facts and Latin vocabulary, mastery of all those things all the time. But I would say the most important thing to do is evaluate your goals for your student or your class or your school, and then just put those steps into place to reach that long goal. And then you put routines and rules around that to keep you in the path. So I would say, we could go subject by subject and every study skill and everything you need, but it's really just about incremental steps towards your goal and keeping in that path is what I would say.
Making progress, making sure that if you're not filling in every line of the study guide, that you're at least working toward that. That, we tell our teachers, if you don't have time to do every question, then, you need to at least do the ones that are on the test. But the goal is that you would do every question, that your students would get there and be capable of doing that. Because I think one thing that happens is if you let them off the hook, and sometimes parents are requiring too much of students, and so that's another problem. But if you start letting them off the hook, then you're not going to be where you need to be at the end of the year, which means you're not going to be ready for the next grade. And that's not between 4th and 5th grade. Not as big a deal. Between 2nd and 3rd, huge deal. Between 7th, 6th, 7th, 8th, huge deal. If your goal is for them to read Homer in the 7th or 8th grade, then you've got to do a lot of work to get there and to get them ready to do that. So you have to think about that too. You have to, it's really hard. I am a in the moment person. I'm not, and Paul helps me a lot with this because even like managing Memoria Press, I'm in this day-to-day box and Paul's a big overview person. And so he helps me to see, well, but this is where we're heading and we're not going to get there. And it's the same thing with school. You know, it's really hard for some people to see beyond the day-to-day. And I'm one of those people.
Well, and we have a lot of compassion for that because there is a lot that goes into the day-to-day.
Well, there is. And you get bogged down in it and you get lost in it. Yeah. Especially at home with your children.
Right. It's like you can get lost in the weeds because there are a lot of weeds to get lost in.
Yes. And you've got this list and you haven't checked it off. So the next day, what do? And then if every day you don't check off your list, then you really need to stop and look at the big picture and see what's happening and make sure that you're going to be at the end of the year where you want to be. And maybe that means not answering every study guide question. Maybe it means not doing every subject. But you need to figure that out and not just keep snowballing it. And then you get to the end of the year and you think, oh, we're moving into 3rd grade and we're not really reading fluently yet. That's a problem, a big problem. So I think it's really important to stop and take a step back. And I think that's what she's doing, is she's taking a step back and saying, how can I fix this? And you said something to me earlier. I don't even know what we were talking about. I can't remember the context of it. Well, maybe it'll come back.
Is it about agendas?
No. It'll come back to me.
Okay. Well, I will say about agendas, the curriculum, everything that Tanya said, but also those little skills that help you accomplish what you need to in the curriculum. So for an agenda, if your goal is your 6th grader going into 7th grade has a wonderfully neat agenda that serves them well, then you kind of have to go all the way back to 1st grade and go, okay, when I give them their first agenda, what are my standards here? So for the 1st grade agenda, it's not even a real agenda, it's a composition notebook, but you have to accurately copy from the board. You have to skip a line. You have to go in order in this book. You have to have good penmanship. So if you kind of let those things slide and they are writing all over the book and they don't put the date on some pages and the teacher's not checking, then you're not serving them well as you go down the line. So
and the homeschooler may not be using an agenda because their work is in the curriculum manual. But I think the same thing, and I've heard you say it, the same thing would apply to a math notebook.
Absolutely.
I was just recently in a class with her and with all the other teachers of a particular grade. It was 2nd grade. And we were looking at how everybody needs to do their math notebook. And it was very specific. On that big graph paper, you have to skip 2 blocks before you start the next problem. You have to skip 2 blocks before you start the next line. Very specific. But hopefully by the time they get to pre-algebra, they're just automatically doing that.
And in a school setting, it's important that all the teachers are on the same page so there's consistency from grade to grade.
That's right.
But there's, is it 2 blocks or is it 3 blocks? The homeschooling parent gets to decide what it's going to be. This just requires consistency.
Yes.
That this is what I told you to do the day before. And then that way, what we're going to be requiring later on.
That's right.
Paul, you have had your fair share of challenging circumstances and students in the classroom. Are there any, the forum post talks about standards that are to be upheld or, good classroom principles. What would you say these are the principles I would give and this is worth sticking to?
That's a fascinating question because I remember teaching 7th grade and kids that were at Highlands, because they came late, I remember I had a child that the handwriting was nearly illegible. He thought he knew cursive, but I just couldn't read it, and so it's basic skills like that. Like I wanted him he could read Homer, he could engage with Homer, but he couldn't hand me in anything that I could understand that that he had written about it that was understanding. So, I was giving him classical studies extra credit to go through the first grade cursive program to improve his cursive. Because I just couldn't, I could not teach him without those basic things.
Mm-hmm.
But I've given my students this year a lot of grief because I'm like, some of you are trying to drive me blind because you write so small with a faint pencil, or whatever it is. But the reality is I can make really tough comments to students because they're not my kids. It's way easier for me to come in as a teacher and make that kind of comment to a student that's not my own. And I remember like when I was in, I guess I was going into 6th grade. I went into private school at 6th grade, and my handwriting was horrendous. It's like the students that you couldn't read. I was that student. And a couple years later, the school I was at, the dean made all of the English teachers give a handwriting assessment to every child, and they identified our worst letter. And mine was a lowercase p. I can make an uppercase p because my name's Paul, but I couldn't do the lowercase one. Apparently, that was my worst letter. And the standard was any assignment you turned into that teacher, if that letter was misformed, it was immediately a point off. It was misformed 5 points. It was 5 points off.
Wow.
But it gave me only one letter to focus on. Right. So anytime I wrote, I just made sure that P was right, and the first assignment that came back and I was getting a 92 instead of a 97, I was like, oh my goodness, like I've really got to fix this. And I remember writing a letter to my aunt, who worked with preschoolers, and she wrote back and she said, what happened to your handwriting? It was night and day. But that was something that my mother, and I know she tried, but she just wasn't able to get me to do it. Whereas an institution that's like, sorry, your grade's going to suffer just because you can't do this one thing, was able to get me to see, oh, okay, I need to really put effort here. And it created a culture in the student body of, we are going to have good handwriting, because that's when I was in 8th grade,
That's funny that the P was your letter.
P was my letter.
When my son Nick was in one of Cheryl's Latin classes, he came home from class one day and he had this piece of paper, this blank piece of paper, and it had a capital P and a little p on it. And it said at the top in her script, write a page of these. So apparently P was his worst letter too in Latin class.
I wonder why.
She got that fixed. I don't know, but a page of P's, that's a lot of P's.
That is a lot of P's.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's I didn't expect that answer. Handwriting.
Because, you can, insofar as like writing in the study guides, answering questions, doing essays later on, I'm asking my students to write essays. I prefer them handwritten because I get better quality thoughts out of them handwritten than I do when it's typed. And if I can't read their handwriting, I can't help them. Or I end up skimming over it because I'm like, I can't spend an hour reading this thing when it should take me 10 minutes. It's a huge thing.
That's what one of our Memoria College faculty said, that she preferred it when her students hand wrote their papers in college because she got better papers. They were more thoughtful and they held together better. Everything about them was better because the thought process is so much more active. And somebody said that it was like a dance really between I don't know where I read this, between your brain and your hand, that they're all just working together in a way that makes beauty, in a way that typing doesn't.
Sure.
And typing, you can type faster than you can handwrite. And so it forces you to think, like your thoughts can actually keep up with handwriting in a way that when you're typing, I don't think they can.
And maybe it gives you more time to actually form a beautiful sentence because it's slower. I don't know.
This is a question for all of you. Do you have any universal principles, if there are any, for challenging behavior issues? Handwriting is one category, but that's more of a technical, I mean, it might be some behavior behind it, but that's a technical thing they're learning. Behavior-wise, anything, or would you say that's case by case? There aren't really universal principles.
Oh, no, there are universal principles.
I would say that one of the things that I always try to talk to new teachers about, and probably if you've ever sat with me long enough, I always tell people to do the walkthrough at the beginning of the year. And I just kind of call this preventative discipline. And my example is when I went to my first grade classroom, we had 16 coat hooks and they're about 2 inches apart, it looks like. So you really can't send all 16 kids to the coat hooks because 4 will be unpacking and the others will be causing mayhem. So what I like to do is I just sat in that room and I thought, how am I moving my students physically? Okay, so I can send 4. What are the other 12 going to do? Because I'm going to try to remove all the obstacles to poor behavior before they ever come in the room. I can do probably 50% of it before I ever see the students. Just if you have a student who's a daydreamer, if you're teaching your own child and you think he's always distracted, well, where's the best place in your home for that? Do you put them facing the window or do you find a nice quieter spot for that student? So just anything you can do that doesn't even put any extra work on the student, just removing things out of their way is huge. It's a big help. So I always tell new teachers, just sit in your room, get your schedule, and really think through the entirety of your day. When are you going to stretch? When are you going to stand up? When are you going to take a break? What's the best time for a snack break? All of those things, because you're going to deal with hungry kiddos or kids that need a stretch. So if you can build that in before you see students, you are halfway there.
And I know, and especially in the younger years, we practice and we redo a lot. I mean, we have to do that with, like, it's a big thing with foster kids is doing redos, right? So because they don't necessarily know what the expectations are, you communicate the expectation, they don't do it right. Okay, you didn't do that, but before we're going to escalate here, we're going to redo, see if you can do that right again. And I mean, that's just a general good principle with when you're establishing those habits. Okay, this is what I expect you to do. Let's practice it. And the next time, okay, you didn't do that right. Let's redo. Let's do it again. And so that they get used to what those motions are supposed to be.
And it's very, just to do this, to have the schedule, even I think in the homeschool world, it's nice to have that schedule. And so the students know this is what my day is going to look like.
Setting expectations.
Yes, setting those expectations. And I think that then is also preventative discipline because it hopefully will take care of the trying to go to the restroom every 5 minutes. This is the time for, even if you have to set a timer. Okay, we're going to the restroom at 9:30. So that is an hour from now. So you can just actually concentrate on your work now. And you don't need to be asking me if you can go to the restroom. I mean, just those little things can give you so much more time. Not just time, but less stress.
And it's almost, the word that was coming to my mind is just like, there's a lot more that you can manage and preemptively kind of curate.
Control. Yes.
Yeah. In a way that, before you even get to the, whatever the classroom experience looks like for you, whether it's a table at home or their desk at school.
That's right.
Well, and I think as the child gets older too, I mean, I think this forum commenter, poster person, she made a comment about, whether you just say, okay, well, just 10 more minutes on this particular thing. Right. And when I was homeschooled, I know when we were younger, right, mom would say, this is what you have to do. But then as we got older, it was, okay, this is what needs to be accomplished. Like, you start taking responsibility on how, like, when you're going to do that. And so then the child starts saying, okay, I'm going to do this at this time, this at this time. I mean, middle schoolish, you can start doing this kind of thing. And then instead of being time driven, because then they can just drag it out and not get as much done, it's this is my responsibility to get this done. And that's a huge principle I live by. And with the juniors is you all have your study guides, like I don't have to go number by number with you. We're going to talk about it all. You all now know what you need to study. And it makes them step up to the plate in ways that they otherwise probably wouldn't.
That's right. I do think sometimes, though, and I was guilty of this too, you think that they should be independent before they really should be independent, or you're not sure. I think we have a lot of, when my kids were 5th, 6th grade, I was thinking, okay, why am I still here?
Well,
but they needed me to be there because it wouldn't have gotten done. It wouldn't have gotten done well. You still have to set that standard. I mean, it's ridiculous, but if you give them an inch, they will take a mile. Or maybe it's just my children.
No, I think you're right. I do think you're right in that even if you have a child, because I remember habitually being done before lunchtime with my work. But then
you were a good little child.
I don't know what I just knew that then I would have 3 or 4
free
hours
time,
to go play before my neighbor who I played with would come home, because he was at public school and he didn't get home till 4:30. But then yes, it is on the parent to go back and check that stuff and then say, hey, I know you're out playing. You need to come back and fix this.
Right.
Yes.
So you do have to set some standards, but if you've set standards and you are overwhelmed and you feel like it's not going well, I think it really is time to stop and think about that and think what you don't want is, I think one of the things in there was like, instead of like cutting study time because the student just couldn't get it done or was whining about it. Then if you do that at that moment, the student has won. But if you decide, okay, I'm going to rethink this, what is really, so we're not succeeding in doing an hour of math a day. So maybe we'll just do 45 minutes. So at that point, you make the decision. This is going to be our math time today. And we're going to work that entire time. And if we do, then we'll be finished at this time. So that you're still in control, even though you have realized maybe it is too much for my child to sit there that long. And every child's going to be different. But the other thing I would caution is that if my kids had not been in a cottage school where the standard was very high, I would never have required of them the things that they were able to do. So I think that's a problem also, because you don't know what your children are capable of. And I remember when my oldest came home with the Iliad in the 7th grade, I was just mad. I just thought there is no way that this child is going to be able to read that book. At this age, this is crazy. So now I'm going to be reading this book to him. I'm going to be dragging him through it. Well, it was totally not true. He was 100% ready to read that book. And he loved it. And it became his favorite class. But I would never have asked that of him. So I think that's a struggle, or it's something, I guess, to be aware of if you're just homeschooling and don't have any kind of outside help at all, is that they are capable of doing more than we think they are and of rising to a higher standard, maybe than we want as mothers to ask them to rise to. But I don't know. I don't know how you do that at home. I mean, I guess how you figure out what, I think we help. We've set the standard with our curriculum, and we're saying this is a living, breathing school with multiple students doing this. And maybe you can't do it the same year we do it, but they can do it. It may be a year or two later even, because I mean, we've got teachers teaching it my son wouldn't have succeeded at home with me teaching him the Iliad because I wasn't prepared to do it. But he was in a classroom with a teacher that loved it. And that made the difference. Of course, we have videos to help with that too. But
I do think that's where you rely on the curriculum, because who would have thought 6th graders could do Horatius?
right, would you ever have asked
Absolutely
that?
not.
Right.
And both of my children did it, and they did it and they were supported by their teachers, and they had a plan, and we knew it could be done, and we'd seen it done. So we thought, okay, we can probably do it too. Mm-hmm. But I would say too, with your standards for behavior or for working through the curriculum, I think it's always best to start with the highest standards, because then you can actually be flexible when you need it. If something comes up or a student isn't maybe working through their math at the same pace and you need to figure something out, or, that hour is too much, then you have freedom. But if you start out really flexible the whole time, I think it's really easy to lose your way, because that's all you're doing is being flexible. So you just kind of bend in a lot of ways. And at the end, I think you're far afield from where maybe that goal that you're headed for.
And it's tough as a parent or a teacher to require something of a child that they're not going to like, right? Because we all want to be loved, right? Even as adults, right? and that it may sour the rest of your day by requiring that, but the next day they will come knowing mom's not going to give on that, or dad's not going to give on that, or the teacher's not going to give on that. And so I better not even ask. Like, I just got to get it done. And I mean, it's a hard principle to live by. It's one I keep reminding myself of.
Especially because you're the parent.
Mm-hmm.
It just makes it that much harder. But you said something really reassuring to me. I don't remember when. We talk a lot. That if you have fallen off, that it's not, you just need to
recalibrate and do it again. You get to do it again tomorrow.
And the kids are adjustable, right? I mean, kids will adjust to what your expectation is. So even if you have fallen off, like you're saying, you just start, you little by little, bringing that back up. And the 2 girls we have in our home right now, I've just been blown away by how
the progress,
right?
Over how long have you had them?
About 4 months, 3 months, 4 months. And just behavioral expectations, like what's okay, what's not okay, and it just reinforced in my mind that kids are malleable to what the standard is, as long as you're consistent with that standard. And I've also been I've been surprised how when we do say we're doing something special here, we don't do something special 3 days in a row. We do something special one day. The next day we get back into the routine, right. And they can handle that. But if every day is a new thing,
right? Well, children really like repetition. They like knowing what's coming. They just like we do. They also need structure.
Okay, I think I have to tell a story here.
Okay.
So back in my 1st grade classroom, I did run a pretty tight classroom.
Yes, you did. I was scared when I just went in there to observe.
That's right.
I always liked going into your classroom.
Thank
you.
So
warm and inviting.
I want to sit by you next time. So I was teaching spelling. I had 16 1st graders sitting in front of me, and I'm teaching, and I look up, and this is back when they were doing a lot of construction. I used to be in the high school building, not the new part of the town. And they were building and doing a new roof. So all manner of critters were around. So I'm teaching, I'm looking at my students, and I look up, and out of my smoke detector, a wasp crawls out. And it's just one wasp, so that's okay. And he's just staying by that. And I thought, keep teaching, keep talking to kids, it's fine. And then all of a sudden, a second wasp comes out. And I thought, okay, 2 wasps. Keep teaching, keep working, life's tough. And then a third wasp.
Oh.
And then one of my students who's behind the smoke detector, I just see a little hand go up.
Oh.
And she just looks up and she said, Miss Luce, there's 3 wasps. And I said, okay, everybody stand up, push your chairs in, let's go to line. And we're just going to go out to the playground for a minute. And then someone who deals with wasps is going to come in. But I tell that story because it is funny. And every time I tell it, I'm going to add more wasps. Just sound very brave at the end. But I tell it because I ran a tight classroom and they trusted me. in that moment, I gave them the same things I always say: stand up, push your chair in, and let's go ahead to line. And they trusted me, and they looked at me. Nobody screamed, nobody cried, nobody made a fit. They just did their things. They walked to line, and we went out in the middle of our day and had 10 minutes of extra recess. But that's because all the other times the standards are, you don't scream in my room. You don't stand up without permission, without asking for something. So while it is a funny story, it is really true. Those kids they never made a peep. They didn't lose a thing. Then when it was done, we came back in and we finished our spelling. But I mean, if you're constantly upholding those high standards and those expectations and your routines underpin all of it,
then they will rise to meet you.
They certainly will. And that could have been chaos. I mean, in my first grade classroom, I'd have crawled out the window. It'd have been nuts, but they just said, okay, Miss Luse, let's go outside. It was so.
That's good. There's that stability, that stable foundation allows them to just rise up to the occasion.
Yes. And when you're flexible, you can be. When you need to be flexible, they will go with you.
Right.
Because they've trusted you this whole way.
And the routines will help mold the behavior in that flexibility. Yeah. I was just surprised where I told the students we have quiz every Tuesday this year, and the only Tuesdays we don't have it is when we're going to have a test on Friday. And, last week I was like, next week we don't have a quiz because we're going to start reviewing for the final exam. A student come up to me and asked me for the quiz because, it was just every Tuesday. Quiz.
Habituated that Tuesday quiz.
Did you give him one?
No, I said, no, it was also a concern of a grade. And I was like, I've got things that are outstanding that I need a grade for you. I will get that done. And then this will no longer be a concern.
Right.
And so, but it kind of, I was like, I thought every kid would be happy to not have a quiz. Not true. Not true when you got a routine.
It's funny. Well, any final encouragements to parents and teachers with some difficult students on their hands?
I would say that training is not always linear. It is go a few steps and review, stop and review, come back after a break. It's a big review for everybody. What do we do? How do we again ask for things? So I would encourage everybody to just know that it's not, you just don't tell them, hey, every day in here, you raise your hand to be called on. And then you never say it again. They've all got it. That's not it. You tell them, you practice. And then when an individual or a class kind of loses, you stop and you say, hold on, let's remember, what are my rules for raising your hand? It's a quiet hand, no sounds, bottom stays in the chair, those kind of things, just a review. So you can get a little off and that's okay. And you just review and you go back to it. So for probably anything.
Yeah. Yeah. That's good. Oh, great discussion. Thanks for joining us, Tara. Yeah. It's always so wonderful to have you on. Yeah. And thank you for joining us too. You can find the Memoria Press forum at memoriapress.com. If you're not a member already, we'd love to have you there. There are lots of resources and discussions that are very helpful to teachers, whether they are teaching in the classroom or in the homeschool. Thanks for joining us. We'll be back next time. Thanks for joining us today on Classical Etc. by Memoria Press. If you like what you heard, please like, subscribe, or share this episode or comment. We love to hear your questions and your comments. If you want to learn more about Memoria Press, please go to memoriapress.com. This has been Classical Etc. We're so glad you joined us, and we'll see you next time.